So what we will do is right click on this folder and choose new file. To create a file, hang on a second. Can you follow along for the moment? Just create a new file, keep working, I'll come and look at what's happening with you. So add a new file of the type, you'll choose Swift file. Okay, this is our game model. So here is how we are going to name it. You'll use your first name and then game model, the words game model. So your first name underscore game model. Okay, let's say create. It will add the new file. And we have seen something like this before. Where was it? We did the exact same step before. For the calculator, we added a model, right? And it created a blank file just like this. It had only one useful line, which was the same line as import foundation. You remember what that is? Import foundation? What does import do? What is, you have seen import statements in other languages also, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it displays the result. The calculator
It imports the library, it imports a framework, a library, a functionality that we need. And foundation contains all the basics of Swift. So it's importing for foundation. We'll start creating our class here. So create a class, give it the same name as the file name. So whatever name your class has, your first name underscore game model, you'll create same as the file name, you'll create a class. Okay, and now we will add these variables to it. Variables or functions as the case may be. So the first one is whose turn. And we'll follow Agajon's suggestion there, call it X. So we'll start the game always with whose turn as X. So X is the first one to start. And what we need is an array called square contents, where we are going to track what is in each square as the game is happening. And in the background we know that so that we can compare with this whenever we want to see if the game is finished. So what happens? There are many ways to create arrays in Swift. We can use the array constructor. We can just initialize it in place as an array. But there is another way which is useful, so I want to show it to you. So in Swift, see array declaration. There are many types. See, this is one way. You can just initialize the array in place. This creates an array which has 8 elements. Array of integers. This will create an array of strings with 3 elements. Another way to declare an empty array is like this, but this is an array of doubles. What we are looking for is this. If you need an array that is pre-initialized with a fixed number of default values, use the array repeating for this many count initializer. So what this is doing is, this statement here, it creates an array of 10 elements with each element being assigned to 0. So it's an array of integers. So we will do this, we'll follow this, we'll create an array using this repeating, and this is how we will do it. Our array name will give, as we wrote on the blackboard here, square contents. And when you type equal to array and then you open bracket, Xcode will give you a bunch of suggestions. You will notice this again and again, that Xcode keeps on suggesting what to do. So when you see these suggestions, choose the one repeating, the fourth one. Double click it and it will ask you for two things. One is, what is the repeating value? So in our case, we'll initialize it to an empty string basically when the square is empty. So all 9 squares are empty to begin with. And how many do we need? We need 9, but what we will do here is we'll choose 10, and the reason will become clear to you later. We'll choose 10 here. So it will create an array that goes from 0 to 9, index 0 to 9. Just like we chose here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If we create an array of 9, it will go from 0 to 8.
Yeah.
But an array of 10 will go from 0 to 9. So we can ignore the 0 and use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And there is a reason for it. We'll see later on why. It just makes life a bit easier, code more readable because of certain things that Swift has. So we've got our square contents, and we have the winning combination that we already know, all 8 of them. So we can also store them. Are they going to change? No. See, these things will change. Whose turn will be either X or O. Square contents, it starts with empty, but it will change into X or O depending upon the moves. But winning combinations remain the same. So instead of declaring as a variable, we can declare it as a constant. And how do we do that? What's the keyword? See, we used var for variable. What is the keyword to declare a constant? In Swift, let. Exactly. Just say let. And it is an array of arrays. So just type those 8, and you will need commas after every element. Okay, so leave some blank space after your array is declared. So at this point, we have set up our model to do some things. Okay, good. So now we have the model, we have the view, we don't have the controller. So in our storyboard, we added this game board, the blank game board. If you select it from this view hierarchy and you go to its identity inspector, the ID card here, it is supposed to have a custom class which is missing. It's blank right now, and it is expecting a class of type UI view controller. If you remember, we did the same before. In this one, in the table view controller, we created a table view controller class and we added it here. We need to do the same here, so it knows which object is controlling it, controlling the view. So how do we do that? We'll add a class of this type, UI view controller, and this is how you will do it. Right click on this folder and say new file, and this time you will choose Cocoa Touch. So choose Cocoa Touch and press next, and over here, first thing you want to make sure is that the language is Swift. It's not Objective-C. If you see Objective-C, change it to Swift. Otherwise, it will create the files of the wrong type. And this subclass of whatever you are seeing there, instead of that, you need to see view controller. So type UI view controller until it auto completes. It should say exactly this, UI view controller, not UI table view controller or collection view controller or some other controller. UI view controller. And when you see this, the class name, right click on that, yes. The class name will change to view controller. Change this to, type your first name here, underscore, and add the word game, because this is the game view controller. It's not just any view controller. So it should look like this, your first name underscore game view controller. Okay, once you have it, it looks like this. Say next and create, and it will create a file which is basically a blank file. Okay, how do we connect this to the view? First we need to tell the view that this is the controller. So just like I showed now, you go back to the storyboard and you go to the, select the controller, this one, and go to its identity, and now you will be able to change this. Just do the drop down and find the class you just created, the game view controller. So that tells the storyboard that this view here, this screen, the scene, it will be connected to that particular class. So choose that, and half your work here is done. Okay, now we have the view controller. We want to start making it talk to the view. Okay, so once you have assigned the custom class, you want to connect it to this. There are these things will be changing. The game state will be listening to buttons. So all of those things we want to connect. And if you remember, in the previous version of Xcode, in our last class, this got updated, and there used to be two circles, intersecting for assistant editor. That went away. It actually got buried in here. These two icons you see. So the first one, if you hover over it, it says adjust editor options. So if you click on it, and it will show an option called assistant. So choose that. So basically, while you are on the storyboard, click on this thing that looks like lines and choose assistant, and it will show you the class you have just created on its side. Okay, everybody got that? If you are not seeing the file you have just created, you might have to change the selection. Sometimes it shows a .h file. Xcode is a bit finicky that way. So we'll start adding stuff here. So what I'll do is I'll make a comment here, a section. So we'll create outlets and we'll create some actions. So the outlet we need is to this label. Okay. Who can tell me how to create that outlet on the code? Right click and drag. So just right click. So I like to make some blank lines here before I do that, so there is space for it to come. And then you right click and drag, and it will show this little pop-up which says connection type and its name. It's the label. Make sure it says type is UI label. That's where we want it to connect to. And we'll give it a name. We'll call it game state label. Okay, so once you have this ready, you can say connect and it will create an outlet. Now what we want is we want to start listening for buttons. What happens when a button is touched? We want. So how did we do that for the calculator? Same. We drag there, but this time instead of creating an outlet, we'll create an action, a function. So let's create another section here called IB actions, and then you can control drag there, and I will tell you how to. So let's create the IB action. If you control drag from the first button, it's going to show this pop-up. It's saying connection type is action. That's what we want. We want it to perform an action. Object, will just leave it as it is because it belongs to this object. Name. This is what will happen when any of the squares is touched. So we'll call this function square touched. Okay. And then the type. Type is the type of the object from which this is being invoked. So once you've typed square touch, don't press connect yet. We'll change the type as well. The type will change to UI button because every time this function is called, it will be from a button. The event and the arguments, they remain the same. It will receive an argument, which is the sender, which is the button that was touched, and the event is touch up inside. That's what iOS wants us to use, touch up inside all the time. So you have an opportunity to cancel a touch. If after touching you change your mind, you can move your finger out of that button and release. So when it looks like this, you've typed the name and changed the type, say connect, and it will appear. So right now this is connected to one button. If you take your mouse, hover your mouse over this circle, it tells you which button. How do we connect it to the other 8? Yes, so when you take your mouse here, it turns into a plus, which allows you to add more items. So just, if you now don't need to right click, just left click and drag it, you can connect it to the other buttons one by one. And when you bring your mouse back, it shows you how many are connected and which ones are they. So this way we will have all 9 buttons connected. So now if I take my mouse over it, it's showing me that all 9 are in place. Okay, let's test it. I'm going to print out just a text saying button touched. So from that function, we'll print that text out and we'll run it and see what happens. So what happens if you click on buttons? It prints button touched. Okay. See, we have a couple of problems right now. One is that all the squares already show an X. And the other problem is we don't know which button got touched. So let's fix those one by one. So everybody got this? Can I move on from this code? Anybody still looking at it? Okay. So we'll close this side, and I'm going to reopen my view hierarchy here and select all the buttons. And also open the inspectors, and in the attributes, all of them have the text X. I'm going to delete it, and it should say in gray default title. That's what we want it to say. And press enter, and it will show all the boxes becoming empty. So one problem is fixed. We are starting with a blank grid. It is not filled with X's. Okay. The second problem is that we don't know which button was being touched. So now we will fix that. Select the first button, the very first one. We are going to use a feature of Swift that allows us to tag views. And we'll use these numbers as tags 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So when this button is selected, go to the attributes and scroll down until you see a section called view. So in view, you will see a field called tag. What is its value? 0. So tag is a property that each view has, and Swift has functions like get me the view with tag number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And by default, all views have a tag of 0. So 0 is not very useful to us because even the game state label, if you click on it, you will see it has a tag of 0. So that's why I said that we will skip the 0, because that can create confusion. If tomorrow you go and add a date or something on it, it will have a tag of 0. So we don't want to deal with that. So we will choose our buttons one by one, and we'll give them a tag that corresponds to what those numbers are on the grid. So choose the first button, make sure this first square is highlighted, and then go and change your tag to 1. Then click on the second and change it to 2. Like that you will assign all 9. Okay. So right now we are at this point. We now basically have a way to tell which button was touched. We'll print that out. So once you have got all the tags in, you can go back to your game view controller, and after button touch, we'll just print the button tag. And the way we access it is, see, we are getting this argument sender. This is the button that was touched, and we want its tag. So we'll just say sender.tag. So because we are receiving the argument, the button that was touched, we can do this, and it will tell us which button was touched. So now when you run it, you should see not only the message button touched, it should also tell you which button was touched. So test all 9 buttons, make sure that your tagging is correct. Okay, so it's 7:17 right now. We can take a break.